adjusting the start time to accommodate competing meetings, I believe, and give the tech team at PPS a chance to wrap one meeting and get everything set up for us. So we appreciate them and want to make sure that they are able to do their jobs well. So glad we could accommodate. Hopefully everyone has all of their meeting materials. I think we were just chit-chatting about how helpful it was to have everything in advance and have everything in one place. In fact, the packet itself nicely includes a link to the agenda. It's a nice one-stop shop. And the meetings from the meetings. It's been a long day, folks. I've been on Zoom a lot. I was actually hoping someone would come as a cat. So I'm going to go with that, the icon of whomever that is as a cat with their video off. That's the closest we can get to the lawyer cat that hopefully everyone has seen. And if you haven't, Google it. It was a bright spot in an otherwise kind of all week.
Can you do that on Google?
I don't know. I bet if you Google it, someone will.
The upside down lawmaker. That was another Zoom mishap.
Oh no, I missed that one.
Yeah,
anyway,
you can do it on Zoom. I don't think you can do it on Google.
Okay.
Damn it.
Well, someone's going to figure it out now, Rita. So I think just stay tuned if they haven't already. So what I meant to say was there's a link to the minutes from our most recent meeting. And our first order of business tonight is to review and approve the minutes. So if you haven't had a chance yet to go ahead and open those and review them, that is our first order of business. And so I will just start by asking if anyone has any corrections to the meetings as distributed. They were from January 28th, I believe was the date. Okay, I will give about 30 more seconds and then ask for a motion to approve if we don't have any corrections or questions.
Sarah, I'm reading for my copy, but prior to you coming on, we had a discussion with the staff regarding the listing of those attending and those not attending, staff attending, etc. I believe the minutes only record those in attendance. So heretofore, in the future, let's make sure we include the complete listing, because these are a matter of public record.
Yep, so the version I'm looking at does, in fact, it's a great point. I know we talked about it last time. It includes members, CBRC members present, PPS staff present, and CBRC members not present, which we've had in the past. So Roger, does that align with your recommendation?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great. Any other corrections or questions about the minutes? Okay. I'm not doing a good job of monitoring the chat. Maybe someone, Arena, thank you. You approve. I will take that as a motion to approve the minutes. Can I get a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Great. All right. The minutes are approved. Let's go ahead then, just toggling over back to the agenda. I think I will turn it over to you, Claire, to give us some introductory comments, and I'm really looking forward to meeting the new CFO and getting to hear from you. So Claire, I'll turn it over to you.
So I am so pleased to introduce you to Roberto Delgado, who's joining us. He and his family are moving out from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'd like him to give him a few minutes for him to tell more about what he brings to Portland. But he will be starting on March 16th. But he has graciously agreed to come join tonight so that he could get to meet you and get to know you a little bit. And so with that, I turn it over to Roberto.
Thanks, Claire. Good evening, everyone. I'm ecstatic to be joining Portland Public Schools and to be joining all of you. I spent close to 4 years in Oklahoma. I'm originally from Southern California, and so I'm excited to get, back to the West Coast near an ocean. So, so that is definitely one of the things that my wife is excited about, and there's a lot of great work happening at Portland Public Schools, and I'm excited to be joining you all, the Community Budget Review Committee, and looking forward to learn from all of your perspectives, because community engagement plays such a critical role, and I know all of you play a critical role in Portland Public Schools, not just from an accountability perspective, but also just I love talking to folks, love engaging, because it helps us see past the blind spots. It's one of those things that sometimes our work tends to put blinders on us, and the more we engage, the more we have conversations, the more aha moments we have, and so it's then just as important to ensure we have those critical conversations to shore up the best recommendations possible. And I think that and I'm laughing at the comment because I anticipate a different ocean, a different shore. And with that in mind, though, it's still huge. I just want to say a huge shout out to all of you for participating in this process. I mean, not many districts and other places have these type of engagements. And I think the fact that you're all invested in it and here already speaks volumes of what we're trying to accomplish. And I'll just briefly share. My parents came to the U.S. from Zacatecas, Mexico in the 1970s. I'm a little older than what some folks may think. It has a 4 in front of it. I grew up in Compton, California during the 80s. So I may be wearing a coat and tie, but I've been caught up in drive-bys. I've seen people get shot, seen some very shady activity, family, unfortunately, who've been to prison and a variety of different things. And, it's like fast forward to today. And how do we put those experiences to work? And how do we put that all into play with what we need to be doing today? And then I think about just me as a dad. I'm a dad to 2 boys. I have a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old. My wife's a teacher. She's been an elementary school teacher. She was in Los Angeles, and she's currently in Tulsa. And just kind of like understanding the importance of striving to have a good public education system, and just the importance of building community, right? And that's kind of like what we're here for, what we're looking to do. And going back to my experiences as a kid growing up, and subsequently having strong mentors, strong teachers, strong experiences, is how do we nourish the whole child? So I look forward to supporting our efforts on resource equity, and I know a lot of work to be done there, and really, one of the things is like we can always, I have this propensity for action, so it's like we can always have these amazing words, but like how are we putting it to action? How does that play out? And so I just want to, I'm looking forward to it. And yes, I think the last comment I caught, I am looking forward to warmer weather. Today's high was like 3. So and there's ice and snow everywhere. Everyone's on lockdown. So it's definitely going to be exciting all around. So I don't know if there are any questions for me, or just, more than happy to answer any questions.
Not many for me, other than from the snow to the rain.
Yeah, definitely more. It was a shocker.
I can tell you, when we first moved from Nebraska to Oregon, it was a year of adjustment to the rain. But after that, living an hour and a half from the mountains and an hour and a half from the coast is next to perfect. So
The first fall in Oklahoma, my boys were, Dad, the leaves are changing colors. They're red. Why? What's going on? And it's like, well, they're called seasons. It's like those are things that didn't exist in Southern California, and so it was an adjustment. It was an adjustment, and I think now, as I make my, came from California to Oklahoma and Oklahoma to Oregon, I know there's always so much to learn, and like I said, I'm just excited to just absorb and what Portland has to offer, and be able to support in as many, in whatever ways possible.
Well, Roberto, I thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself with the CBRC. You'll get to know them well. You have meetings with them throughout the year. And this is the first time I can say that I've ever hired a CFO on without meeting them in person, right? It's a new way of doing our work, right? All of us, he's in Oklahoma and we're in Oregon, and we're all in our different houses, still figuring out how to continue with our meetings. So I actually get to meet Roberto next week, and I'm excited to meet him in person. So that'll be
ditto. Yeah. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I think we see each other from about here up, right?
Right.
And I guess there won't be any handshaking or any of that, because we're not supposed to do that yet, right?
Air high fives, like virtual high fives.
Yes, exactly. I'm thinking bumping elbows.
Right.
Okay, so
Claire, can I ask a quick clarifying question? I just wasn't doing a good job listening at the beginning. What's the timetable again for you being out here and joining the team officially?
I'll officially be joining on March 16th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. We're really looking forward to working with you. And we talked a little bit about, after we read the profile that Edweek had, I forget when it ran, I think there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm to learn from the sort of participatory budgeting processes and ways that you've engaged community, both to understand the budgeting process, but also to inform it. And so I think as a group, we're really looking forward to learning about your experiences and thinking about what we might be able to do here in Portland. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just the fact that there's already a committee, that is already a huge step. So that's exciting.
Great. Well, welcome. We'll share all the hidden gems and treasures about Portland with
Awesome.
as well. There are many
Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Claire, back over to you. I think.
So yes, and I do see that it's going over budget updates, and last month we were asked to send those updates in writing, so we've done that. And so is this now just a time for us to ask questions, get clarifications? I'm understanding rather to receive the materials in writing and then be able to ask questions, and that gives the CBRC more time for dialogue. So I wasn't planning on presenting unless there's things you want me to highlight and go through for clarification. Or I can go through the packet and do some highlights if that's helpful as well. I'm not sure. I want to get some direction from what would be helpful to the CBRC.
Yeah, I'm looking around at all of my fellow members since we haven't had a chance to discuss this as a group. I think over time, at least from my perspective, the idea behind having the opportunity to receive materials in advance is sort of a coinciding expectation that we'll all review them and therefore won't have to spend as much time in sort of a sit and get that information presentation format and have more time to raise questions or invite discussion around some of the questions that are submitted in advance. Since this is our first meeting and it is maybe like a migration that will happen from a set of norms of being presented to more of a discussion based on information shared in advance, I wonder, and I'm going to sort of ask for input here from the group, whether it would be helpful to have Claire step through some of the highlights to start, and then we save time for conversation, discussion, questions. I know I'm just having a chance to look at the responses that you prepared in advance to some of the questions, and I'm guessing most of us have not had a time to look at them, and certainly have not had time to digest them. So it may make sense, Claire, after you present, for us to even take a couple minutes of silent, just 5 minutes or less to look through those questions and answers, and then open it up for discussion. So those are my thoughts, but I would love to hear from the group. What would be useful here? Would it be helpful? Maybe the first question is, would it be helpful to have Claire do some highlights from the presentation to start us off? Maybe just give me a thumbs up if that would be useful.
I want to say that I really appreciated the response that Claire sent out, and I have read them, and I made comment on the question form, but I didn't see until 5:46 this afternoon the answers that were posted, and then I noticed that my question that I submitted on that form wasn't there, so I must have done it incorrectly. But I noticed a number of you submitted questions via email. So is that the format that we're to follow, and or are we to use the form that was on the comments that were sent out? Maybe there's some procedural questions first that might be addressed.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
I think maybe Sarah, tonight maybe the fairest way to do it is to go through the memo that Claire did, kind of just touch on the highlights, and then just kind of clarify what the process is for submitting those questions to get those answers. I think that would probably be the fairest thing to do.
Yep. That sounds good to me. So Claire, why don't you do some highlights, and then we'll make sure that we clarify the process. I think I might have strayed from it myself. So by submitting my questions not through the form, so it might be a helpful reminder to all of us.
So, and I have to confess that I thought the form was being introduced tonight, and for to be used for the next time. Okay. So, the only place I pulled questions from was from what I received in email, because I thought the process hadn't been introduced yet. But clearly we need to all come to agreement on what the process will be, and I'm happy to respond to any and all questions. If that's the main point, right? Yes. So I've put both the meeting packet and then the questions that I responded to. These were so the meeting packet went out on Monday, and then we've gotten some questions over the last couple of days, and so those are the ones that I responded to and posted right before the meeting, because I thought it was important to get as much as I could ready for you guys, since you had taken the time to go through the packet. So let me go ahead, and I'm seeing lots of you in here, so that's good. And I will start off with, this is just something that once Roberto gets here, he's probably going to set up his own system with you, but what I'll ask him to do is to continue with this system through the end of this school year, so that then as we start the new year, then if we want to do a new system, we will. But let's have some consistency at least through June. It makes a lot of sense. And so what I've done is, from our last meeting, throughout the meeting, there were times when people asked questions that we either couldn't get information or they wanted more information. So we tried to accumulate that. And then when one question would get answered, and there was like another component that people didn't know about, I would just add that into the memo so that it was a more complete report and thorough for the CBRC. So the first thing I wanted to, what we didn't have was the specific numbers from, this is for the board's adoption of a general fund balance goal for ending June for the 21-22 budget year. And so you'll see here in the first paragraph of the memo is the scenario the board approved. So we do have permission to use 2% of fund balance. And you'll find that as we are building 21-22, we are making less reductions to services and assuming we'll use fund balance. At the same, to get to those numbers. At the same time, we're working really hard this year to save. We have a target of trying to save 2% to help offset the use of fund balance, because there's things that we're not using this year. For instance, those big for student buses aren't running around very much, other than maybe delivering some meals and now a few Lippy runs. Limited in-person instruction. This just has started. So we have lots of savings from that, as well as we have savings from fewer substitutes being used. So I think when people are teaching from home, the substitute use has gone way down, because if you have the sniffles, you don't want to come into school and give that to everyone. But if you're working from home and you have the sniffles, you can still, teachers are choosing to really work with their students. Yeah, I'm in the meeting packet, and I'm right at the beginning in the general fund balance goal. So I was trying to describe where we were having some savings this year to try to help mitigate some of. So right now you're seeing we had a 9% fund balance projected at the end of this year, but you're going to see that to continue to grow as we have identified savings this year. The next part is the budget development section, and we did have a strategic budget team. The superintendent formed that had members from all across the organization, and we spent 4 half-day sessions to really think about. If you remember last year, we had our strategic plan rollout with the 5 system shifts and some strategies to support them. So we talked about, and we made investments last year to support that. And those strands, and then we're continuing to refine and round out our investments in those areas. At the same time, we're working on completing our strategic plan. A lot gets interrupted when you have a pandemic, because you have to really focus on health and safety issues and getting a whole new system of learning up, meaning going from in-person full everyone in the class in the school to everyone learning from home. So some other work got put on pause, and that included finishing out the strategic plan. We are coming back this year and really continuing it with the educator essentials and the graduate portrait components. So you'll see those coming out in our March 9th meeting. So that will round out that strategic plan. So, but know that this strategic budget team is working to support the superintendent, included last year we had principals. This year we probably doubled the number of principals in the meeting. And so it really brings that school-centered, student-centered voice into the room. And then I would go on into the next one that there was a question about teacher diversity data, and that you'll also see a response. A couple of you asked about that because you really want hiring and retention data. Well, we did ask for that for several years, but what we received is what we shared with you was the retention data for both teachers and administrators, because that's what we had available to us. And I know that the strategic, I'm going to say SPP, Strategic Performance Planning and Performance. I'll get it right. Anyway, I call them SPP because I can't remember how to say the full department. They are working on those very metrics. That's another part that was interrupted with pandemic, because the leader of SPP has also been leading the reopening of schools right now. So we all get to wear, multiple hats when we have new experiences and leading a school district. So with that, we have shared what we have available to us, and know that we are working to get more of the data that you were requesting. The next is you asked for some information about the COVID, the money coming in and the money going out. And so we have a high-level summary there for you. And know that we are still designing the learning recovery components that will be for starting in this summer and continuing through the next school year. And then we'll actually have additional in the summer of, would that be 22? So we're really planning for a 3 part approach. And then as we go along, thank you, system planning and performance. Thank you, Yusuri. Maybe that will stick in my head one day. So we've got more information for you there, and know that we haven't decided how to spend all of it yet, because that learning recovery plan is something that takes time to develop, but we will be bringing more on that. And it'll either be in the March 9th meeting or in our proposed budget message when we bring the proposed budget to you in April. In the conversation last time, we were asking about what are the goals and what are the metrics, for seeing if we're making a difference for our kids. I did share this, if you see in the blue and the green, the board student achievement goals, both achievement and growth goals. And so those are what they set. Now they set in October of 2020, before the pandemic. And the reason that's important is we have, I also linked a mid-year progress report. And if you look at, it's a really long report, but if you look at the first page, it has an executive summary of the progress after that first semester. And it was on track at that point. We were on track to meeting our first year goal. But then, of course, we closed schools in March, right? And then we haven't had the state assessment that we normally have in the spring. And we didn't have the MAP assessment again in the fall. And we're now having a MAP assessment in the winter. So there is some lag time in terms of meeting goals, because we haven't even had the assessments. This is something the federal government has approved, the state government has approved, and our board understands that it's just when you send people home trying to do a state assessment, it would be really difficult to do that from home. So know that I know a lot of the questions that I responded to today was about this very thing and what's the plan. I can tell you that we haven't, the board, I don't know, Frida, if you want to mention anything here, but I've heard discussion between the board and the superintendent about the need to review the goals once you get school reopened, and we might need to recalibrate the goals based on where students' learning is at that point, but really working hard in that learning recovery and getting in. I don't believe we're not having the state assessment again this year. Again, there's a waiver for that from the federal government. So we do recognize the need for assessments, but we also recognize the need of focusing on getting kids back in school. So it's trying to balance out what we can do with our students and families as we respond to a pandemic. Okay.
Claire, can I ask a quick question on that last point about, it relates to this question about metrics. I don't want to get us too far afield, but can you speak to the status of ODE's request to waive spring assessments this year? Has it been submitted at this point but not approved? Is that correct? Or am I?
I thought the feds had already come out, but I might be mistaken.
Okay.
So, but I know that there have been delays in our assessments, and so trying to evaluate how are the investments doing in meeting our goals.
Right.
Is certainly, we're behind on that, and there's not a lot of different things that we can do with people at home. So getting kids back in school is really our focus right now with the vaccines, and we still have to offer that option for our families, because some of our families feel safe sending their kids back and some of our families don't feel safe. So we're going to have to continue to offer both online learning as well as in-person hybrid model.
So just to make sure I'm following, going back to sort of I think the question, or maybe there were maybe there was more than one version of this question around just what, given the disruption to the metrics that we typically use to assess whether we're on track toward things like, literacy, third grade literacy, middle grades math, things like that, the things that we outline as our goals. So there's work happening now to try and determine what other ways we as a district may be able to understand students' progress towards those goals as we get closer to 21, 22. We're recognizing that we've had a disruption. We may have another year of no end of year assessments. We'll see where that goes, but trying to figure out, what else we can use, what other information we can be using to help understand how kids are doing and whether we're on or off track or how far off track we may be. Is that a fair?
Yeah. So right now we're in January, we started the MAP assessment, right? So that will be our first, baseline of where are kids at right now in the middle of the pandemic. So that will be our first data point for sure. And that will help us also with the learning recovery and knowing what we need to focus on for our children.
And will you all, I'm assuming since it's just happening now, but do we have data on the participation rates for MAP from the first administration earlier this year? Like, do we know what the opt-out rate was?
There wasn't one in the fall, but you're talking about the one in January? The fall one.
No, my dates are so mixed up, right? My second grader just took it today, for example. I don't know why when you said January, I was thinking that was this calendar.
Yeah, it's happening right now.
That's right. So we will at some point in the near future have information on participation rates for this administration. There was not one in the fall. Got it.
That's correct. That's correct.
Sarah, since you've chimed in with questions, my question was on page 3 of your report, Claire. You list the goals, but goal 3 doesn't have any explanation of what it is. Am I misunderstanding that something's missing?
There is something missing in my memo. You're right, Roger. And it's me doing, snip and copy and paste from a PDF into a memo. And I can see that I missed the bottom part of that.
I think it carries down into the section below. So it says goal 3, and then there's just a break, but it's the 8th grade student snapshot. That's all supposed to be one. I think it flows together.
So I didn't miss anything, but what I did is it was not easy to erase the double line in between. Because in our budget book, it was on 2 separate pages. Okay. All right. So those are our goals. And then I do want to highlight that mid-year progress, because that shows in detail how our students were doing before the pandemic. So we knew we were on track for meeting our goal before the pandemic. So that gives me great hope, because we were making the progress we were looking for. And so some of the system changes we've been making were working before the pandemic. So that does mean that if we can get everybody back in school again, that I have great hopes again to continue on that path. Okay. The next section was on graduation rates. And again, our graduation rates continue to increase. You can see a couple of charts that I linked in there by both by school and by race and subgroup. So just know that that's just another way of assessing, at least at the high school level, what's happening with our students. And we've had continuous growth in our graduation rates for, gosh, it's been over 10 years now. So it's there's some highlights there of even, especially our BIPOC students that are making great gains. So again, hopeful that we're on the right track. And so what I'm trying to do, while I didn't have the state assessment to share with you, I'm trying to share with you what I do have in terms of student progress. And then at the end, it was just a long list of questions and things that are still being worked on. Know that we understand your requests and are doing our best to get the information you want, but some of the things aren't able to get done that quickly. But know that we're going to continue to work on, especially what I'm hearing from you guys is you want to know how we're spending the money and what improvements are we seeing from students because of the way we're spending our money. So that direct tie. So I hear you, and I know that it's frustrating to keep waiting for us to deliver on that. It's frustrating to me, to not have that as well, because that's how we can do our best work. So know that we will continue to bring that data to you as assessments come back in the spring, if they come back in the spring, or map testing, whatever we can do with our students. Okay. All right, so that covers the packet, and I listed all the attachments so that people could find the pieces. And
Sarah?
then I don't know if you need me to go over the questions that I responded to earlier today.
So Sarah, yeah, I think that was and I think when you sent out or I guess when Claire sent the stuff out, the request was that if people had questions or comments on this, they were to send them back to staff by Wednesday. That was my understanding, and so that's what I did. I think in the questions that you have, one of the suggestions, I mean, staff is going on record as answering these questions. I think I don't have any problem with the questions that I asked. I think you might even include a field in there, like who asked those questions. I think that's, a very fair question. If we're making staff do the work, we should actually, take responsibility for asking the questions. So it's, not the anonymity thing. And I think that would actually be be a very positive thing to put in the in those questions. So I think, Claire, thank you for going through that again. But I think getting that to us and allowing us to digest it before the meeting is going to be super helpful. The biggest thing that I have, kind of the takeaway from all this is I'm a little unclear as to, some of the goals and the numbers that we're hitting, kind of the data that we're trying to use to make determinations. I don't know if we can do that anymore, because I don't know that the data exists. I don't know that the data from the MAP and the SPAC or SBAC from last year, I think it was partial. I don't think it's super reliable. And God only knows what the MAP testing is going to be right now. Our kids watched a video on, MAP testing, from home. And I don't even know what that testing is going to look like. I mean, it's so hard to, and part of me is a little concerned that we were so tied to just saying, okay, we got to hit this 44%. It's got to get to 60%. We're, tied to, 75%. We're, hoping it would get to 81%. Can you help us with that, Claire? I don't know what even.
So I think I'm going to ask you to have patience with the district, because our board recognizes the issue. Our superintendent recognizes the issue. Our system planning and performance, now I'm practicing that, I memorize that. Our SPP folks, we all recognize the issue. And so that's why you see me giving you graduation rates to show that our high school students are doing well. But the board and Dr. Russ Brown, our SPP chief, system planning and performance chief, he needs a chance to have, he worked with the board to set the goals. I think the first MAP assessment that we're doing now will help us with a conversation with the board and the superintendent and Dr. Brown. And that's what needs to happen, and say, okay, this is where we were. I've just shared you where we were. And then with the new MAP assessment, this will be where we are. And then what are the goals we want to reset? They're basically wanting to just calibrate, because trying to make, we had a certain percentage of growth and a certain percentage of achievement on each area. And if there's been a learning loss, the idea of trying to make those same goals is probably not realistic. Sarah, you had your hand up.
I did, and I also, so two things. One, I want to, and just so that we all make sure we hold ourselves accountable for giving as many folks as possible a chance to jump in with questions and thoughts. Just a reminder that you can use the chat to let us know you have something to say. You can raise your hand like I just did and jump in, but I want to make sure we're hearing from everyone who has something to say. And I want to encourage everyone to speak up because I think all of us have something to say and a really important perspective to share. So this is a little bit of a question, but also just, and maybe tease us up for a question, more formal request that I can submit next time. So on the one hand, I totally appreciate the inclusion of whatever data we have that can give us, help us understand how our students are doing. The graduation data are certainly one piece of that puzzle and are really helpful. Graduation data are some of the sort of most lagging, backwards looking data we have and aren't going to tell us at all really about how students in our schools right now are doing, the experiences they're having, how the impact of distance learning, how that's impacting their, academic attainment. But perhaps equally, if not more importantly, I think there's an increasing understanding that we need to be trying to measure engagement in general, right? Because if you're not showing up, it doesn't matter what is being offered if you're not showing up, if you're not engaged. And so I'm curious what engagement data PPS is collecting in terms of who's showing up for comprehensive distance learning, who's not showing up, ways that you're tracking that information, and whether you are able to say anything to help paint, a little bit of a picture of just, what experiences students are having and using that kind of participation information. This is a shorter term way for us as a committee to understand and really as a community to understand, the experiences students are having. And I think there are probably a short list of other metrics like that. I know that districts across the country are tracking to help, as a substitute for the disruption to other metrics that we're used to collecting. And so I just put that out there for us as a committee to be thinking about. And I would love maybe, and I'm happy to submit this formally as a request for next time, if there are data like that to share. I think that maybe Brad, that helps get at some of the questions that you have. I don't know that they become part of the formal accountability system moving forward as indicators to letting us know whether kids are on track towards those 4 goals. But I think personally it would be helpful to see.
Great. I look forward to the submission. Director Moore, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that whatever data we come up with at this point, there are going to have to be a lot of asterisks around it. It's going to, I am not a huge fan of standardized tests. But I think the MAP testing has more actionable information than the SBAC. And even though the reliability of the data coming out of the MAP test now is going to be debatable, I am persuaded that it's still worth doing. We're going to have to be very careful on how we use it, I think. But it will give us at least a window. And same thing, I think, with any data we have on engagement. As I understand it, the engagement data that we have is based on logins. And we don't have a data system to evaluate kind of the quality of the engagement online. So there's going to be, right now, I think we're in the same situation as everybody else. You do what you can with what you got. And the board is going to have to go back at some point. My guess is it's probably not going to happen soon. To recalibrate the board goals and maybe come up with new metrics given kind of where we are. The last thing I would say is I think right now they're fielding the school, what is it, successful school survey. So a survey of students, families, and staff. And again, there are going to have to be a lot of asterisks around it. And we're going to have to make sure that whatever data comes out of that, we're going to be using for, system improvements rather than accountability. We're not looking for data to beat people over the head with. So anyway, that's, we are where we are.
Thank you, Director Moore. And I see, Roger, you have your hand up.
Yes, I have a couple observations. It sounds like our discussion really is the intersection between behavioral science and normative theory, and you're pointing out that you're relying a lot on the graduation data. I only would point out my experience at working at Franklin High School that some of your categories in graduation data can be skewed just by the database itself. For example, Franklin one year had 6 Native American students, 4 of which did not graduate, and so the data that year was really, really bad. The very next year, 7 out of 8 graduated, and so that was really, really good. So you can have dramatic swings just due to a very small database. And I just wanted to say that I find myself pretty well concurring with Director Moore's comments. So thanks.
Thank you. How about someone that we haven't heard from yet? Is there others that would like to ask a question? And I can't tell if that hand, is it Rita again? Is that your hand up? No, just went down. Okay, so is there others that have a question? Oh, I see one here in the chat. How will the district determine need for recovery, learning, summer school, additional resources, etc.? So for sure, the MAP testing will help with that, as well as teacher referral and others that are working with our students. We'll certainly we'll be able to know from our staff in the schools. And so I don't have specific I don't know the specifics on that, but I do know that usually summer school is by teacher referral and also the assessment that we have on the students. So those 2 things are what we look to overall. Is there anyone that else that we haven't heard from yet tonight? And then I'll go back to Brad after that. Okay, well, please feel free, if you're not if you want time to think through your question, please feel free to put it in the chat. And then Brad.
Yeah, thank you. I think, so the question that I had asked about, what the cost is, per student. I think you had that report from 1819 that actually had the cost per student per school.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I was asking that is, if we're unable to base things on, well, let's say that we still want kids to, be able to read by, 3rd grade and be able to, be ready to start, getting on the journey for life, by 8th grade. Can you drill that down, by the student? Can you show in the budget how much you are spending by student, and then actually show that you're actually devoting more resources toward maybe 2nd and 3rd grade to try and boost literacy, or 7th and 8th grade to boost, things on those testing? Because if we're not able to look, I'm trying to figure out how we write a report to say that the budget is aligning with whatever goals the board comes up with. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to, come about that. If you do it only by school, that's okay, I guess, but it's much better if you can actually drill it down to the student, and then you can get it down into the individual classroom. So I'm trying to figure out, how do we write a report that actually says you're doing something, that's, what's in line with some sort of goals.
We don't track the budget by classroom or by student, but we can do some calculations on cost per student being, for a program. But we also, our strategic plan, Prospect Studios, has been working with us on that. They'll be helping us with the March 9th meeting. And with that, one of the things that we're hoping to bring to you is, if you remember the Student Investment Act application, that grant, that we have now submitted our first and second quarter. They were due the end of January to ODE. And right now it's very long. And I mean, I'm happy to give you the full report, but I'd really rather give you, at the same time, more of a summarized executive summary of the report of how we've been doing on those investments. So I think that's one way for us to help with that. But we are also asking Prospect Studios to help us with, this is where we started last year. This is our interim report of the progress I've made. And this is now the other components around because the system shifts means the whole district. Educator essentials are the people in the classrooms, and then the graduate portrait are all our students. So we're adding 2 more realms to it. So I think you'll see more of a framework that will help do that. So I know it's hard to keep waiting to get pieces, but truly it's just not ready. We're still preparing and designing this and going through that iterative process of creating the components, and there's engagement going on across the community about the educator essentials and the graduate portrait components. I can't hear you, Brad, and I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry about that. So specifically, you can't generate a report based on those things, or we're going to look at other data. I guess that's kind of what I was.
So we can share. We have a report on the investments from the Student Investment Act, right? So that we can share with you. But right now it's a long report that we submitted to ODE. Happy to share that long report, but I would rather share that long report with an executive summary on the top. Okay, that will be more meaningful. And that's what we're trying to bring to you next month. And also rounding out the last 2 pieces of our strategic plan. So that will give you some help. It'll help with framing to help with the reporting. But also when we prepare the proposed budget, we'll have, we won't be able to show our student achievement by school that we were showing last year. We won't be able to do that. But we will be able to show what's happened with FTE and dollars per student being spent at each school. So we'll be able to supply the dollar side, but we won't be able to necessarily provide what's the growth and achievement because we didn't have the tests. Okay. So at this point, I don't know if there are other questions, but I also want to be able to turn it back to Sarah at some point because I think we're past our time.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the way that we set this agenda up for tonight was to move from, some sort of presentation by PPS of the abbreviated presentation to an opportunity for us as a committee to have an open discussion, which I think we sort of merged into already in some ways, although this was more sort of us asking questions, Clara, you and you responding. I think the hope is moving forward that we will always have a good amount of protected time for discussion as a committee in a way that is less about us asking questions to PPS and getting responses and more about, well, given this information, what does this tell us and what else do we need to be on a path toward? I think, Brad, this is what you're getting at. If at the end of the year, we're being charged with giving our take on the board or on the superintendent's proposed budget, we do need to have conversations about the ways in which we're going to evaluate whether or not the proposed budget is in alignment with needs and puts us on track toward a goal. Thank you. I'll be down in a second. Pizza's here. And she'll probably
That's important business
here.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that update. So with that said, I do think we have the balance of time, which we can use as much or as little as we want or need as a committee to talk amongst ourselves about additional questions we have, brainstorm things that we may want to include as requests moving forward. In subsequent meetings, I think our next meeting will be a joint meeting with Director Moore and the other directors, focused, I think, primarily on COVID-related budget expenses and
towards creating
other
transparency within the special education
aspects
process
of recovering learning loss and things like that, which I'm looking forward to. So I think I just invite conversation at this point, additional questions, concerns, just things that are in your head. And I want to encourage everyone to, I know this is a public meeting and we're joined by PPS staff, but I think it's our opportunity as a committee to, raise concerns, questions that we have and have conversation. I did want to make sure, I was looking back in the questions themselves, and there was a question around the 5 shifts, Claire. And I think you had mentioned in your response that we could talk through them, in particular, 2 things that seemed unclear: system-wide achievement and goal setting. So it may make sense for us to touch on that as part of this next session. I want to make sure we honor the question that was asked and the request to help sort of make that language more accessible. But otherwise, I think we can move into questions. I think some of the ones that were submitted in advance, there may be still conversation about, but that's my proposal at this point. It looks, I see Karen has a question. So maybe we'll go to you next, and then we can revisit this question about the system shifts and invite other questions. All right, we see you.
I see Renee, yes.
Oh, sorry, Renee down there. Sorry.
Yes, I think it has my daughter's name on there. I'm not sure.
Yes, and I'm blind at this point in the day. Yes, go ahead.
One of the things I did hear you say is we can't really look at achievement because we don't have the test. Can you hear me, Claire?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because we don't have testing, but also there are numerous reports or research. There's research has been done that the standardized tests don't always tell the story anyway, and it's the grades. So when we're looking at the grades that the teachers are giving the students compared to before COVID, I don't know how helpful that is because it's so different, but is there going to be a report of looking at how the grades have changed?
So that it sounds like a question for me to take back and ask the system performance folks, the team, to see what kind of metrics they're going to be able to offer. So that would, and I can bring that back. But I hear that you really would like to see a grade report pre-pandemic and during the pandemic.
Yeah, and I know it's difficult because I've been talking to teachers, so it's just a different animal. But we know there's students who haven't been engaged online, and I'm thinking a number of those students are the students that are part of the LIPI, are back in school right now. The students who it seemed they were lost through the cracks. But if research shows that the teachers' grades tell more of a story about student success in college, then that could be something else we could use.
Sure. So I hear the question about grades and pre-pandemic and current. So Renee, I want to make sure that you see on the agenda there's a place for you to submit a question, but if you need me to do that for you, I can also do that. So
Okay.
I want to make sure it's a great a heads up for me that question is coming.
Okay.
I also see Brad's question. I think I responded to the questions today. And so Prospect Studios It has been used by the district for the community visioning process. They're not hired to help us with the budget process. They're hired to help us with the strategic plan process. But for me, I don't separate the budget and the strategic plan. They are the same thing. Right? They are, one is a plan and the other we give investments to support that plan. So they go hand in hand. And then we have the metrics, which we're taking a lot of discussion today, that we understand we don't have all of them, but we watch our metrics to see if what we're doing is making a difference for our students.
And have you used those consultants, those same consultants in previous years, or is this the first time you've used them?
They were used for the community visioning process that was it 3 years ago?
Reimagine Oregon?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and now is the second time the district has re-engaged them. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 2019, I think, 1920.
Okay. So
Okay.
2 years ago. Yeah. Something like
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I see Roger has a hand up. Maybe it's from before.
I'm sorry, it's from before.
Okay. And so I'm turning it back to you. No, Sarah, you had a question that you wanted me to respond to, and that was.
Yep. If you go back to the questions document where you chronicled all the questions and then provided some initial answers, that last one, I think you had said that you would talk through the system-wide achievement and goal setting components of the system shifts.
Right. And then I saw that we had another email on it too, after I sent that question for the response. I'm trying to find it here in my email. I think it was Irina, right? Is that correct? Maybe she can. Do you want to go ahead, Irina, and share what?
Yeah, my thinking was the following. So I looked system-wide, and I envisioned that it's both from pupils' perspective, from student perspective, and from teachers' perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But then I looked at the shifts and then discovered the system-wide is only covered the teachers. So it's only covers what we are doing with upgrading our teachers and teachers' diversity. And that's why I was kind of like wanted to hear from you. Is it really system-wide only from the teacher's perspective?
No.
Or the system-wide should be aimed towards the students' achievement and student change, and then the teacher kind of like happens because the students come first and we want them to change. And because of that, we are changing or suggesting the ways for teachers to get developed and change.
So if you think of our vision, we were just talking about our system shifts. That's the system-wide component. And that's people like me, right? It's people like Roberto and Nicole. It's also Rita, right? So system-wide means it's all of us. And it can be, the system shifts are directly looking at the whole, well, it's not a school-based, but we may be looking at a K-12 system for all of our students, or even a pre-K-12 system. So when we say system-wide, we mean throughout the whole organization. Certainly in that system shift, there were 5 of them. One of them, I think it was C, was the one on the diverse staff. And that one was really talking about a system-wide shift that impacts the teachers that we hire and retain, right? So in the staff and the administrators we hire and retain. So system-wide can mean more, it's used in many different ways. For that system shift, it was talking about staff. But when you think about, there was like curriculum and pedagogy, that includes teachers and students, right? It's a combo. So it's not always used in the same way. And then going back to the question, the other part was the goal setting. So again, the goal setting is when our board set goals with Russ Brown, right, about student achievement and student growth. So those were, that was a goal setting process. If that, and I'm not sure where you're reading those two pieces together, but goal setting can also be, you know, when I set a goal as a leader in the district, I set goals every year and I share them with my supervisor, and then we talk about them throughout the year about how we're doing on those goals. And then at the end of the year, he gives me a review based on how I did on those goals. Goal setting could be with a student. What do they want to accomplish this year? What do they want to learn? And, you know, what do they want to really work on this year? Is it their reading? Is it their math? Are they interested in science? Right? And then they work with the teacher to meet those goals. Okay. And I'm not sure if it's in a certain context that I don't know where it's, you know, if it's a certain place you're reading it, that you need my help understanding.
I was reading it from your memo because you were specifically explaining this Shift C, and the Shift C had this language with system-wide, but it was only applied towards the teachers.
Okay.
It was in that context.
Okay, perfect. So then maybe we got there. Okay. Roberto, are you learning a lot about our system in these conversations?
No comment.
He's a good learner tonight.
He's rendered speechless. He's learning so much. Or just hard to find the unmute button, which I routinely have a hard time with on Google Meets. So I want to just invite CBRC members at this point. First of all, if there are outstanding questions that you hope to have answered as part of this meeting, please let me know in the next few minutes. I want to take a minute to clarify the process for submitting questions moving forward, just so we're 150% on the same page about that, and can all be rowing in the same direction. And then I just would love to spend a couple of minutes talking about the March 9th joint work session with the board. You know, getting some input to the extent folks have ideas right now about questions, topics that you want to discuss, information that you would like to see in advance of that meeting, since we have the time now. And that, in fact, wasn't our agenda. I think it would be nice to spend a couple of minutes getting input from this group leading up to that meeting, so that we can make sure that as staff is working on, you know, the agenda for that meeting and working with the board and getting their input, they have ours as well. So why don't we first take the first things first, the procedural side of things. Claire, can I ask you to go, or someone on the PPS team, to clarify the process moving forward for submitting questions in advance?
So what I've done is, whoops, am I muted? No,
nope,
I'm not.
You're good.
On the agenda, it says Q&A form. So I created a Google form for people to submit questions. And this has, and I didn't pick the date, so I'm not sure how the date was picked, but the date is by February 24th to submit your questions so we can have them back to you for the next meeting. Now, the next meeting will be a little different because it's not going to just be the CBRC, but certainly we want to respond to your questions, but it's going to be a combination where we're delivering you more information about the strategic plan. We're delivering this student investment account reports, you know, hopefully with that executive summary that will be helpful to you of what we've done, you know, halfway through the year, what we've accomplished there. And then also looking at their initial work around the educator essentials part of the strategic plan and the graduate portrait. And so this will be an update both for the board and you at the same time. Okay.
Well, could I say something about that form? When I used it, I found that I was only able to ask one question and not a series of questions. Is that the way it's designed?
So You can submit it as many times as you want, but what I'll go back in there, or I'll ask you, Suri, to help us by going back in there, and we'll let you submit 5 at a time or something. And then if you have more than 5, you can submit another set of 5. Okay?
Great. So, Director Moore, can I put you on the spot? Maybe, can I try? See, you can always say no. I'm curious, as you think ahead, and you and your fellow board members think ahead to that session that Claire just described, what are you hoping for? Like, what is leaving that meeting feeling like that was really useful and productive, and wow, I have more information to draw on as we consider the budget moving forward and consider plans? Like, do you have a sense in your head of what you would like to see happen? And I guess the second part of that is, what would be most helpful? I'm trying to think about the structure. The last time we did one joint work session last year, I believe. I think just one, if memory serves. So we may have had more planned, and then the pandemic hit and everything was disrupted. I have sort of the structure and how that went in the back of my head. And so I'm just curious with that context and frame, how you'd respond to those questions. And then maybe that can help us as a CBRC, think about how we want to show up and how we can be most useful and how we can prepare ahead of time.
Okay, so the real answer is good question. I don't know. But let me blather for a bit and see if that helps. So first, I would hope and expect that this would be quite different from the joint session we had last year, because that one was around the strategic plan, and it was actually at a pretty early stage of the strategic plan, so it was very kind of theoretical. I wouldn't expect a lot of that for this one. I think we're going to be trying to get really down to some brass tacks. And if the focus is going to be on COVID, is that what the plan is? That it's going to be primarily?
It will be. Certainly our learning recovery will be part of the investments that we're talking about, but it's we're really trying to round out the other 2 components of the strategic plan, and then also report out how we've done on the investments from last year. So last spring, we did the SIA process and made investments, and that was approved, by the board, and now we've got a report showing how we've done and use those investments, and this would be a chance for us to review that data with you. Although I don't know how much data, and a lot of it will be narrative from the investment owners about what they've done to date.
So I would think that, I think what we're probably going to end up with is, input, output, but we're not going to get to outcomes. Like, we're not going to know what the impact of the investment was. I just don't think we're in a position to even know. So full disclosure, Claire and I have not talked about this at all, and I haven't been part of the planning for the joint session, so I'm making stuff up here, which I'm happy to do. I do it all the time. But you may not want to quote me on this at any point. But I would think that there's been, as I understand it, quite a lot of work done on the kind of articulation of the strategic plan since the last time we looked at it. So I'm hoping to get a better sense of all of that, and then just get some, spreadsheets that say this is what what we've done. This is what we are hoping to do, and this is how it matches up with the priority areas that we have established. Because I don't think the priority, I mean, Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the priority areas have changed very much. I mean, we may have added one, everything COVID, but beyond that, I think the sort of priorities framework, I'm expecting to be pretty much the same, right? So I think it's filling in a lot of the missing info that, I don't know, does that help at all?
And I think, well, another part of the goal is so that our principals and teachers can see themselves in it. In system shifts, it really is talking about a high level, but when you talk about educator, then you're getting to the teacher level. And then the graduate portrait is definitely to the student level. So it helps our school personnel see what we're trying to do with the system shift. So it's really rounding it out. The strategic plan, though, is not going to be finished until May. So it will be, here's the preliminary work. They've had a lot of focus sessions with teachers, especially focusing on our Black and Native teachers and our Black and Native students. So they have been engaging in focus group conversations in doing this work. So I have not seen the work yet, but we're getting closer to preparing for, I don't have the specifics for what it's going to look like on March 9th.
Right, but I think even unfinished, it's going to look way different than it did a year ago when we had a joint session, like way different. Well,
and it's also a chance for us to get input from the CBRC and the board on where we're headed with it too.
Yeah. The other thing that I would expect to come out of that meeting is that we will all know a lot more, with a lot more specificity about what we actually have been doing. I mean, I'm aware of a lot of initiatives that have been going, a lot of things, a lot of buckets of work that have been happening, and I kind of know. I'm comfortable with what I do know, but I don't know a lot of the details. Like, I don't know a lot of specificity. So especially around the grow your own educator programs. Like, I know there's a lot of work going on. Could I tell you with any specificity what those are, how many people have been involved and that kind of, no, I can't at this point. So I'm hoping some of that will come out of this meeting too.
Brad, I see your hand is up, I think.
Yeah, I think for that meeting on March 9th, I think to set us up for the best chance for success, I think we need to maybe have you and Judah and Parker and Jackson, kind of get with Director Moore and kind of refigure what the goals are, for the CBRC and kind of what we're going to write a report to. I think that would help a lot of these discussions rather than just kind of, it's easy to say, oh, it's the pandemic. And then it just kind of piddles out. Right. But I think we need to figure out what it is, that we're going to try and figure out how to target. Is it how many, students that we, identified that were, Parker mentioned earlier, how many missing or disappeared students are there? How many do we recapture those students? Is there? I think the metrics that we were using, last year are not as. I think they're going to be valuable in the future, but I'm not sure that they're going to be valuable right now. And I think we need to get some kind of guidance before we can even start, putting together a report. And so I think that's probably the discussion that maybe can happen. That would be my suggestion, Sarah.
And Dr. Brown and his team have been working on those metrics that you're talking about. So, I mean, I just don't know the work. And so we really, we need to get some information from him as well. him and his team. But he's also working with the strategic plan consultants as well.
And will he be participating in the session, the joint work session, Dr. Brown?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, one thing moving forward, if we as a committee agree that it would be useful, it doesn't have to be, I think we'll have an opportunity to dialogue and engage with Dr. Brown and his team at the system performance and planning. I'm going to practice too now, Claire. Team at the board at the joint working session. It may be that as a committee we feel like we need more time with Dr. Brown and with his team, and which includes now former CBRC member Christine Pittman. I don't know if you guys remember working with her last year, so she's now working as a part of that team. So that, I think that's the kind of thing where, moving forward, Brad and others, if we have follow-up questions or want to dig deeper into some of that, I can't imagine that Dr. Brown and his team would, not want to support our understanding and help us think through some of those things. So we can think more about that for future meetings leading up to our board report as well.
I'll give him a heads up that you guys are going to want some time with him.
Great. He'll be super excited. Speak for him. So other hopes, dreams, ideas for what success would look and feel like for CBRC coming out of that joint work session. I just want to take this opportunity, since we're all together, to gather as much input as we can, and then as we work with Director Moore and the PPS team ahead of that meeting, we can make sure we're reflecting everyone's input.
I'll just add that I don't know if it's a hope or a dream, but it's been great listening to the conversation, and you guys are hitting all the same questions that folks across the country are contending and wrestling with. And when I talk to my peers in other districts, and it's just kind of like the same conversations about aligning resources to strategy. How much of it is COVID learning loss versus learning acceleration, and kind of thinking about all the metrics and how to make all the right shifts and resources. So it's just for what it's worth, it's a national conversation, and you guys are asking all the right questions.
I appreciate that. That feels validating in some ways, right? Even if we don't have clear answers, and that can feel frustrating, I think it is always helpful to know that we are, wrestling, at least asking the right questions, right? And working towards clarity. And, I think what I'm hearing, my interpretation of a lot of these questions is, in a lot of ways, what I feel myself, which is, I think we as representatives of the community, many of us with students currently, experiencing the disruption to learning, and many of us who, are coming to understand it in different ways. A few of us who are experiencing it, ourselves, right? Parker and Jackson. So I think so much of this is about, to me at least, there's so much urgency and so much need right now, right? And it feels like it's growing every day in terms of kids' mental health and wellness, just the data that we do know nationally around students who don't show up, right? Millions, somewhere between 1 and 3 million students that we just, across the country, we just plain don't know where they are, right? To less sort of intense, but equally, challenging things and experiences kids are having. I think we all feel that. And I think as a committee that's focused on making a set of recommendations about budget and financial resources that are going to be put towards some of those challenges, I think that I'm hoping that, whether it's the joint work session or subsequent meetings, we can just continue to ask like fundamental but crucial questions, like, are the resources that we are planning to spend this summer and next year aligned with the needs? And to the extent that we know them, and that may be imperfect information that we're using, and it may be atypical information that we're using, but I think we have to continue to ask these questions, because I think we all feel a great deal of urgency to make sure that with the limited resources we have, we're directing them toward the students that need them the most, towards the challenges that are the most urgent and important. And I think we have to continue to, it is hard. Those are hard questions to answer. Even just understanding the need is really complex right now because for all the reasons we've articulated, but we have to continue to ask those questions and try and, push ourselves and push our public school system to be responsive and to deploy resources in a way that really meets the moment, insofar as that's possible. So I think we, as a committee, I think I would encourage all of us to keep asking hard questions. I think it's going to make all of us better. It's going to make our system better. And importantly, I think it's going to help kids. So keep them coming. So with that, I will pause again and just invite a final time. Do folks have additional questions, things we didn't get to tonight that you hope to discuss, things that you would like to see on the agenda for the March 9th joint work session? Irina.
I submitted the question using the form because I wasn't sure what the next meeting is going to be, but now I see that maybe my question doesn't quite fit the next agenda. So the question was about the financial report, and I was curious what happened with our support services. I kind of understand why the education went down expense. I'm asking the expenses, but it wasn't clear to me why the support expenses went up and significantly higher than budget. And I was thinking it's sort of putting Claire on the spot, but maybe she knows what were the main drivers, why these support expenses, operating expenses were higher, I would say more than $1 million than what we budgeted. And I was comparing year to date last year and year to date now.
So you're talking about our first quarter financials?
Yes. First quarter financials.
Yeah, and so I'm going to ask Nicole to help me with this, but when I know about support services, we spend a lot in building and facilities. If you think about how many bottles of hand sanitizer we bought and how many to have some in every classroom and things of that nature. But we originally purchased things out of general fund because we didn't know how much stimulus dollars we were getting. So if you remember the timing of the federal stimulus, there was some that came last spring, and then there was some that came in December. So we're moving some of those things around. But I'll also ask Nicole to help me because we're currently reviewing our second quarter report, and I need to go back a couple of months in my head, and she gets more into the details. So do you have some memory on what was up in the variance on the support services of general fund in the first quarter report?
Yeah, when we're looking at year over year, you also have things that are in there when you look at instruction and then support services by at the function level. There's also, COLAs and steps and fringe increases that are also part of those year over year comparisons that are going to increase. So those will generate sort of that trend upline. And then we do have all of the CDL stuff that was originally placed in the general fund to keep things moving forward as we received our federal money, and now we're working on sort of shifting those things around. So those are the main drivers of the year over year difference that you see.
Our second quarterly report will be better because we're farther in the year and we knew more about what funding was coming.
Okay. I think unless there are further questions or discussion items, I'm not. Roger,
I just wish we could arrive on a consensus as to how we're dealing with questions procedurally. if you're going to provide the form and suggest a date by which the questions are submitted, I'm fine with that. But I find it disturbing that one has to constantly look at their email all the way up to 5:46 today, literally 20 minutes before this meeting, to find the latest piece of information that one should read and be prepared to respond to or whatever. And I don't think it's fair to staff. I think we ought to have a cutoff time and abide by it. But that's my preference.
So it was literally my choice to try to respond to people's questions, and I was trying to honor what had been requested in our last meeting. And so normally I wouldn't try to respond within such a short time frame, but I also know that you've needed some supports this year. You've had a change in leadership this year. Now you're going to have another change in leadership. So I was trying to give you some extra support for this meeting, but no, I didn't intend for anyone to have read the responses by this meeting. At the same time, for some of you that had the questions in your mind, I wanted to help you by having that information during the meeting. So there was not an intent from me for everyone to read it by the meeting. I just wanted to frame and be responsive to this team and their requests. But I hear your...
Just to be clear, I'm not criticizing your response. I just think as a committee, we need to be, as a courtesy to you and to the staff, if the deadline is stated at 12 noon on such and such a date, that our questions are submitted by that time, and you can respond accordingly. The CBRC has a history of doing this, drafting its final report. In previous years, Rita can vouch for, we've had a 12 noon deadline, and we've had comments received at 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon, whatever, that all were included in the report and so on. It's not fair that some abide by the rules and others do not.
So moving forward, it sounds like we will have a clear process. We will have a process period back up and running for submitting questions in advance, and the expectation that the PPS team will take those questions, assuming they are submitted ahead of the deadline, and respond to them. And to confirm, we'll circulate those prior to the meeting, or and with, to the extent possible, a little bit more time than a few minutes before. I think we can all work and do our best, and I think it's fair if our questions don't get submitted in time that they get moved to the next meeting, or if we have time during the meeting, we'll raise them as discussion points. So I think we can all agree to that. I think we can also, I think all of the points you made, Roger, are totally valid. And I think we are imperfect humans living in a very complicated and exhausting world and moment. And so I also, as a human, I just want to extend grace always to everyone and acknowledge that, I don't want to shut anyone down and anyone's questions down just because you don't meet a deadline. I think we'll work and be, respectful. And if, you have a question that comes to you after the deadline, maybe it doesn't get answered in advance, but please do bring it. I think we want everyone's perspective and we don't want to shut that down. So I think we can all agree to do our best and abide by the new procedures. It may take us a minute to get used to them. Again, we're living in a global pandemic, but I think the points are well taken, and we will all, I think, on the district side and on the CBRC side, I think we can all agree to do our best, and I think the system that we're putting forth will allow us to have more productive conversation. Hopefully you'll let us know if it doesn't, and also help us just have a process to make sure we're getting everyone's input and having time to discuss it. And I really do want to keep pushing us as a committee to create space for everyone's voices to be heard. I'm taking up way too much airtime tonight, and so I'm going to work on that, but I really do want to encourage and invite everyone to, I'm going to try and leave more space. I want others to take it. I really do think we are going to be better as a committee and have better feedback and ultimately a stronger report to the board if we are all bringing our questions and concerns and comments to these meetings. So hold me accountable to that, and hold Judah and the other co-chairs accountable to that too. And if you have ideas for ways that we can be more inclusive, if it doesn't feel like easy to chime in a meeting and you have a suggestion to make that truer, please let us know, email me, call me, text me. I would love to hear from you. Okay. Any final questions? Okay, Claire, when can we expect to have an agenda and materials? Do we have a sense of that for the March meeting yet? Not to put you, if there's you don't know yet, that's fine. I just want to give folks a sense of what's coming next.
So in my first paragraph of my memo was trying to describe this will be a normal routine where the Monday before the Thursday meeting, we a packet out to you.
Okay.
Okay. So that's intended to be a normal routine through June anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Great, Roger.
So Sarah,
go ahead. Jennifer, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't see the hand.
No, go ahead.
Will CBRC chairs and co-chairs, apologies if I missed this, be involved in setting the agenda and the plan for that March 9th meeting?
So we have the other pieces. We have talked about having staff and the co-chairs meet ahead of time to plan. It's not necessarily meant for this March 9th meeting, but it's meant for the rest of the CBRC meetings. But it is certainly, it would be great to have the input from the CBRC that I can take to the board agenda planning and back to our Prospect Studio consultants that are preparing information for the meeting for us. Because it's kind of it's really three different departments that are working together. Jonathan Garcia in our community engagement area, in our strategic, oh gosh, he's also got a strategic name. Okay, Shanice, give me, thank you. So so it's really Jonathan Garcia's work, and it's Dr. Russ Brown's work, and soon to be Roberto Delgado's work, with bringing those three components together. And he's going to miss it by about a week, but he'll be here.
I'll do my best to catch up.
Okay. But it's really, so we're really working on combining some of that. Certainly we want to make sure we're getting from the CBRC what you're hoping to get from the meeting, but also we're still working on planning. That meeting's a month away. We're still working on planning for that meeting.
And about the agenda specifically, I think having an agenda setting meeting would be, or having reoccurring agenda setting meetings is what was briefly talked about. And I think it could only be beneficial. And I think if there's, if other members of the committee have things that they'd like to talk about or like to see, I think both the CBRC leadership team, I feel sort of goofy saying that, but I can't think of a better nomenclature. I think that's provided we give staff enough time. We're not just throwing curveballs at them a week ahead of meetings. But I think if there's something that
so the Surrey has been charged with setting some the agenda planning meeting for the CBRC, and to include staff, the financial leadership staff as well, so that because we found the January meeting was a little bit because some of the planning was done with the board representative and didn't include staff. But we worked it through with Sarah and figured it out. But it's, I think, a best practice for us to plan the agenda together so that we deliver.
Absolutely.
Before. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The meeting was is a joint CBRC board meeting, but it's on the board adopted a budget calendar back in, oh gosh, I don't remember what months. I want to say October, that set out the meeting dates for the budget process, which is a board responsibility, but certainly they wanted to have the joint meeting with you. Does that help you with have I been responsive to your question?
It answers my question. So I think then that the bigger question is, what does the board need from us at that meeting, and how can we support at that meeting? And this isn't the group to answer that, but I think we keep asking each other, and the real question is, how can we support and help the board?
Director Moore, I don't know when the board's retreat is scheduled. Do you have that was a question?
The retreat is not this weekend, but next weekend. And I have already asked other board members to forward to me ideas that they might have about specific requests that we might want to make of CBRC. Have not heard back yet, but I'll let you know what I hear. People are thinking. So.
Okay, we are at 8 o'clock sharp, which is our adjourning time. So I'm gonna respect everyone's time and evenings. I know it's been a long day for me, and I'm guessing for many of us. So big thanks as always to all of you, and I really want to appreciate Claire and Nicole and the others who helped I think turn a corner and put us onto, I think, a much better, more organized, more prepared path. Yasuri, I should call you out specifically as well. Just big thanks and gratitude for taking the extra time, and I do really appreciate you being responsive and being willing to try something new, and we're really looking forward to Norberto. If I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, please correct me.
That's really good. You got the roll the L and the R. Really good.
I'm trying. We're really looking forward to working with you as well. So just want to appreciate you for being here and for staying a lot longer than I thought you would. So I know you've got a lot going on. So
I'm all in.
Appreciate it. All right. Please reach out, all of you, with questions, concerns, ideas, all the things between now and when we next meet, and we will follow up with meeting minutes and a reminder about the procedure for asking questions and deadlines and all that good stuff to make sure we're all holding ourselves jointly accountable and in that way. Thank you all.
Have a good evening.